I never expected my son's birthday trip to begin with public humiliation at 30,000 feet. Liam and I had just settled into our first-class seats when the supervisor appeared, tablet in hand and judgment in his eyes. He looked at my hoodie, at my excited little boy clutching his toy plane, and decided we didn't belong here. Mr. Harlan. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you and your son to move. These seats are for premium passengers only. I pulled out our boarding passes, crisp and clearly marked first class. He barely glanced at them before shaking his head like I was wasting his time. The other passengers were already watching, and I could feel the heat rising in my neck. These are valid tickets, paid in full. There's no mistake. He didn't argue. He simply motioned toward the back of the plane, like we were being escorted out of a club. Liam looked up at me, confused, his small hand tightening in mine. This was supposed to be his special treat after a tough year. Instead, it was becoming something else entirely. Daddy, why can't we stay up here? 2 weeks ago, I sat in my lawyer's office signing the final documents. No one at the airline knew that the quiet single dad in economy was about to become their majority owner. I wanted to experience the airline as a normal passenger one last time before everything changed. Now that memory felt like a cruel joke as we were moved past the first-class lounge. People stared. Some whispered. Liam kept his eyes on the floor. I kept my voice steady for him, the way I always had since his mother passed. It's okay, buddy. We'll still have fun wherever we sit. They reassigned us to row 32, middle seats, right next to the bathroom. The contrast hit hard. Minutes earlier, we had been at the front of the plane. I noticed one flight attendant watching us from across the gate with a strange, thoughtful expression. While we waited to reboard, I bought Liam a hot chocolate to make him smile. My mind was racing. This wasn't just bad service. It was the exact kind of arrogance I planned to fix. I had no idea who they were really turning away. It's okay, Dad. I like sitting in the back sometimes. As we stood in the economy line, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't cause a scene here, not in front of my son. But this airline was about to learn exactly who Alex Thompson really was. They have no idea what's coming. Boarding the back of the plane felt like walking into a different world. The seats were narrow, the air thicker, and every passenger seemed to sense we didn't belong up front. Liam squeezed my hand tighter as we shuffled down the aisle, his toy plane now clutched against his chest like a shield. We're almost there, buddy. Just a few more rows. Mr. Harlan stood at the curtain separating first class, arms crossed, watching us pass like he'd won some private victory. He didn't say a word, but the smirk on his face said everything. I kept my eyes forward, jaw tight, while inside I felt the first real burn of anger I'd been holding back. We folded ourselves into the middle seats, knees pressed against the seat in front. Liam's legs barely reached the floor. He tried to look excited, but I could see the sparkle fading from his eyes. This was supposed to be his dream flight. Instead, it was becoming a lesson in how the world treats people it doesn't recognize. Daddy, is it because we don't look rich? Lena Martinez was prepping drinks when she caught my eye through the curtain gap. She hesitated, then glanced toward the front where Mr. Harlan was still lingering. Something in her expression shifted. Curiosity mixed with quiet doubt. Sir, if there's anything I can do to make the flight better for you and your son. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A single encrypted message from my lead attorney. Final signatures cleared. Ownership transfer completes in 48 hours. Congratulations, Mr. Thompson. I deleted the notification instantly, heart pounding. No one could know. Not yet. Not here. Not now. The plane began to move. Mr. Harlan walked the aisle one last time, checking seatbelts with exaggerated care. He stopped beside us, leaned in just enough for only me to hear. The words were quiet, but they landed like a slap. Mr. Harlan, some people just don't know their place. Enjoy the ride back here. The woman beside us overheard and shot me a sympathetic look. but said nothing. Liam stared out the small window as the runway blurred beneath us. I could feel the walls of this economy cabin closing in tighter with every second. Turbulence hit early, and the seatbelt sign stayed on longer than usual. Liam's small body tensed every time the plane shook. I wrapped my arm around him, trying to be the steady ground he needed. Inside, my mind was already rewriting the airline's future, starting with people like Harlan. Lena returned with 2 small juice boxes and a quiet apology in her eyes. She lingered a second longer than necessary, studying my face like she was trying to place something familiar. The first crack in the airline's arrogance was forming, and I hadn't even revealed my hand yet. "You seem different from most passengers we move back here." The plane suddenly dropped hard, like it had hit an invisible wall in the sky. Overhead bins rattled. Passengers gasped. The seatbelt sign blinked on with an urgent chime. Liam's small hand shot out and gripped my arm, his eyes wide with fear he was trying so hard to hide. I pulled him close, shielding him with my body as another jolt shook the cabin. The woman across the aisle clutched her rosary beads, whispering prayers under her breath. This wasn't just bad weather. Something in the way the plane was handling felt off. "Daddy, are we okay?" Lena was bracing herself against the counter, trying to secure a loose beverage cart that had broken free. Mr. Harlan burst through the curtain from first class, face flushed, barking orders at the crew. His usual arrogance cracked just enough to show panic underneath. "Mr. Harlan. Martinez, get that cart locked down before someone gets hurt." Harlan moved down the aisle like he owned the turbulence itself, checking passengers with forced authority. When he reached us, he paused, eyes narrowing as if our presence made the situation worse. I could see Lena watching from the galley, her expression shifting from concern to something sharper. "Mr. Harlan, keep your kid calm back here. We don't need any scenes." The plane shuddered again, and a low warning tone sounded from the overhead speakers. I recognized that tone. It was the auxiliary hydraulic alert. Most passengers wouldn't notice. Years of designing flight control systems before I ever bought an airline came rushing back. "Liam, it's just the wind playing tricks. The pilots have this." I unbuckled and stood, moving quickly but quietly to where Lena was still fighting with the cart latch. One look at the panel and I saw the problem. A misaligned sensor pin, exactly like the ones I used to fix in my old workshop. Without thinking, I reached past her and gave the latch a precise quarter turn. The warning light went green. "Try it now." The secondary pin was binding. Lena stared at the fixed latch, then at me, her eyes narrowing with sudden recognition. She pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen while the plane continued to buck. Mr. Harlan was still 2 rows away, oblivious, but Lena's face changed completely. "How did you—" "That's not passenger knowledge." I sat back down beside Liam just as my phone vibrated again, this time with a different message. "Ownership transfer accelerated. Board emergency meeting moved up. They want the new majority owner on the ground in 2 hours." My stomach tightened. The secret was no longer 48 hours away. It was closing in fast. Not like this. Not in front of him. Lena followed me back, her voice low but urgent, the turbulence finally easing around us. She held up her tablet, a corporate memo glowing on the screen, the one I had hoped no one would see until we landed. I stood at the edge of a choice. Keep hiding for my son's sake, or let the truth begin to surface right here. Alex Thompson. That name just came across the crew briefing. "Are you—" "Mr. Harlan." "Thompson? Alex Thompson? The same guy we let go years ago?" Heads turned. Whispers rippled down the rows. Harlan's voice grew bolder, feeding on the audience. Every word stripped away the quiet dignity I had tried so hard to keep for my son. "Mr. Harlan. The fired engineer who thought he could lecture us on safety. Still pretending to be somebody?" Liam shrank against me, his small body trembling as he tried to understand why everyone was staring. I felt the old shame flood back. The day they walked me out of headquarters with nothing but a cardboard box. This was the moment everything I had quietly rebuilt began to crumble in front of the one person I swore would never see it. Daddy, why is he yelling at you? 6 years ago, I stood in that same airline's boardroom, pointing at schematics covered in red flags. I warned them that cutting costs on backup hydraulics would endanger families one day. They called me dramatic. Then they called security. The same week they fired me, my wife's car accident left me holding her hand while machines beeped their final countdown. I promised her I would protect Liam from a world that punished people for speaking truth. That night, I decided to disappear, to live small, raise our boy in peace, and quietly buy the company that had broken us both. Harlan's laugh echoed through the cabin as he waved the tablet like evidence. Passengers who had pitied us earlier now looked away in embarrassment. I sat there holding my son, feeling every sacrifice I had made suddenly feel worthless. Mr. Harlan, some people never learn their place. Enjoy the rest of your flight, engineer. Liam's quiet tears soaked my hoodie as he hid his face against my chest. For the first time since signing those ownership papers, I wondered if I had been selfish, dragging my boy through this just to prove a point. Everything I had built in secret felt like it was collapsing at 30,000 feet, leaving only a single dad who had failed to shield his son from the world's cruelty. I'm so sorry, buddy. I thought I was doing this for us. The runway lights rushed up to meet us as the plane descended through the last clouds. Lena knelt by our row, tablet glowing in her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. The ownership transfer had completed 30 minutes ago at 35,000 feet. Mr. Thompson, the board is waiting at the gate. They know everything. Passengers stood and gathered their bags, unaware of the earthquake about to hit the airline. Mr. Harlan positioned himself at the front curtain, still wearing that same arrogant smile. I unbuckled Liam and held his hand tightly, heart steady for the first time in hours. Stay close, buddy. Everything is about to change. The moment the cabin door opened, 2 airline executives in dark suits stepped forward. They ignored Harlan completely and walked straight to me, extending their hands with quiet deference. Lena stood beside us like a silent witness, her eyes shining with quiet vindication. Executive number 1. Mr. Thompson, welcome. The board has asked us to escort you immediately. Harlan pushed through the crowd, confusion turning to outrage when he saw the executives flanking me. He tried to step between us, still believing he was in control. The terminal lights felt brighter, every eye now turning toward the unfolding scene. Mr. Harlan, what is this? This man was removed from first class for a reason. The executives guided us into the quiet lounge just off the gate, closing the glass doors behind us. Liam looked around, wide-eyed at the leather seats and city view, still clutching his toy plane. Harlan followed us in, red-faced, demanding answers from people who no longer answered to him. One executive turned his tablet toward Harlan and spoke the words I had waited 6 years to hear. Effective immediately, Alex Thompson is the majority owner of this airline. The lounge fell silent except for the distant hum of jet engines outside. Executive number 1. Mr. Harlan, your behavior toward Mr. Thompson and his son has been recorded. Harlan's face drained of color as the reality crashed over him. He looked at me, then at Liam, then at the executives who were already pulling up his personnel file. The man who had humiliated us now stood exposed in front of the very system he thought protected him. Mr. Harlan, this is impossible. He's the guy we fired. I stepped forward, voice low and even. No anger, only quiet authority. Liam watched me, confusion slowly turning to awe, as he realized his dad wasn't the man Harlan thought. 6 years of silence finally broke in the most dignified way possible. I warned you about those hydraulic systems once. Today you proved exactly why I bought this airline. Harlan's shoulders slumped as the executive informed him his position was suspended, pending review. Lena stepped beside me, offering Liam a small smile that said everything words couldn't. Justice didn't need shouting or revenge. It simply arrived, quiet and complete. Mr. Harlan, I didn't know. Placed my hand on Liam's shoulder as we watched the planes taxi below. The executives waited respectfully while Harlan was quietly escorted out. In that moment, the single dad in the hoodie became the man who would change everything for every family that flew with us. See that, buddy? Sometimes the person they kick to the back is the one who owns the whole plane. The heavy glass doors clicked shut as security quietly escorted Mr. Harlan from the room. I knelt in front of Liam, brushing a stray curl from his forehead while the city lights twinkled beyond the windows. 6 years of living small had finally paid off, not with anger, but with the quiet dignity of truth finally spoken. It's over, buddy. Daddy's not going anywhere. Lena walked beside us toward the exit, her uniform suddenly looking different under the soft terminal lights. The executives had already offered her the position of Director of Passenger Experience, effective immediately. She looked at me with grateful eyes, the same eyes that had first shown doubt when we were moved to economy. Thank you for trusting me back there, Mr. Thompson. I won't let families down again. Our car waited under the glow of street lamps, the driver holding the door open with quiet respect. Liam climbed in first, still clutching his toy plane like a trophy now instead of a comfort blanket. For the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend we belonged in the back seat of life. City lights streaked past the windows as we left the airport behind. Liam rested his head against my shoulder, his breathing finally steady after the long, emotional day. I watched the skyline and realized this wasn't just about owning an airline. It was about building a world where no child would ever feel small again. You're like a superhero, Dad, but quiet. Back home, the familiar kitchen smelled of the spaghetti I had promised Liam before the trip. He sat at the counter drawing airplanes while I cooked, the weight of the day slowly lifting from both of us. This small house would soon feel different, but the love inside it would stay exactly the same. Tomorrow we'll talk about what kind of airline we want to build together, okay? I tucked him in, the dinosaur nightlight casting gentle shadows across his walls. He looked up at me with complete trust, the fear from the plane long gone. In his eyes, I saw the future I had fought for, one where my son would never doubt his father's strength. I love you, Dad. Even when we sat in the back. The next morning, I stood in the top floor office that now belonged to me, looking out over the runway. Lena was already in her new role, presenting ideas to improve economy class comfort for every family. Word had spread quietly through the company. The quiet single dad in the hoodie was now the man changing everything from the inside. That afternoon, Liam and I sat on a bench watching planes take off in the distance. He flew his toy plane through the air while I thought about the long road that had led us here. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't loud. They're the ones that let a father look his child in the eyes and say, without shame, that everything is going to be better. Ready for our next adventure, buddy? And somewhere high above, another flight carried families who would never know how close they came to meeting the man who now owned the sky.